There comes a moment in every life when the loudest voice around you is no longer your own. It is the voice of expectation, the voice of history, the voice of fear disguised as wisdom. It whispers who you should be, how much space you deserve to occupy, how quietly you should dream, and how carefully you should exist. If you listen long enough, you begin to mistake those borrowed voices for your own. You wear them like a second skin until you forget the shape of the soul that was waiting beneath them all along. But there is a day, a quiet, unforgettable day, when something inside you refuses to remain asleep. It does not arrive with applause or permission. It comes like dawn breaking through a window that has been closed for years. You begin to realize that every name the world has called you, every limit it has placed upon your shoulders, every doubt it has planted in your heart, was never the final truth. They were only stories. Stories repeated so often that they sounded like destiny. Yet destiny has never belonged to those who simply accepted the stories handed to them. It belongs to those brave enough to write a different ending. The world has always been eager to measure people before it truly knows them. It will hand you labels before it offers understanding. It will judge your worth before it witnesses your strength. It will ask you to become smaller so that other people never have to confront the size of your spirit. And if you are not careful, you will spend years trying to satisfy voices that were never meant to guide your life. You will search for approval in places that cannot recognize your value because they have never learned to see beyond appearances. The greatest prison is not built with walls. It is built with the belief that someone else has the authority to decide who you are. Once that belief settles into your heart, every choice becomes smaller than your potential. Every dream becomes negotiable. Every gift becomes hidden beneath the weight of doubt. But the moment you question that belief, something extraordinary begins to happen. You discover that freedom has never been waiting in another place. It has been waiting inside the truth you were too afraid to claim. Your real life does not begin when the world finally applauds you. It begins when you stop asking the world for permission to exist as your fullest self. It begins when your reflection becomes more important than the opinions surrounding it. It begins when your own voice becomes louder than every criticism you have ever carried. That is the day you stop surviving someone else's expectations and begin living your own purpose. And once that day arrives, there is no turning back, because a soul that has remembered its own name can never again be convinced that it was born to live someone else's story. From the moment we enter the world, people begin assigning meanings to our existence before we have spoken our first complete sentence. They decide what we are capable of, what we should become, how we should behave, and even how much we deserve to dream. These judgments are often wrapped in tradition, expectation, fear, or convenience. Some come from strangers who know nothing about our hearts. Others come from people who genuinely love us, but cannot imagine a future larger than the one they have known themselves. Over time, these voices become so familiar that we stop questioning them. We begin to believe that the identity handed to us is the only one we are allowed to wear. The greatest danger is not that people will misunderstand you. The greatest danger is that you will eventually misunderstand yourself. When someone repeats a limitation often enough, it begins to sound like truth. You stop reaching for opportunities because you have been told they belong to someone else. You silence your opinions because you have learned that your voice makes others uncomfortable. You hide your gifts because standing out feels more dangerous than disappearing. Without realizing it, you exchange your authentic self for a version that earns approval but slowly loses its spirit. Society has always been eager to place people into neat categories. Labels are easier to manage than human complexity. They reduce living, breathing individuals into simple stories that require no deeper understanding. Once a label is attached, many people stop looking beyond it. They no longer see your imagination, your resilience, your intelligence, or your compassion. They only see the version that fits comfortably inside their expectations. The tragedy begins when you accept that label as your permanent identity, believing there is no life beyond the boundaries someone else has drawn. There is a quiet cost to living according to other people's definitions. Every decision becomes an attempt to satisfy expectations instead of honoring your own purpose. Every success feels strangely empty because it belongs to a version of yourself created for acceptance rather than fulfillment. You may receive praise, recognition, and admiration, yet still feel like a stranger in your own life, because none of those rewards belong to the person you truly are. They belong to the mask you learn to wear. Real identity is never something the world can hand to you. It is something you uncover through experience, reflection, courage, and honesty. It grows stronger each time you question an assumption about yourself. It becomes clearer each time you choose truth over comfort. The journey is rarely easy because discovering who you are often requires letting go of who others expected you to become. It asks you to release inherited fears, outdated beliefs, and borrowed dreams that were never yours to carry. The voices around you may be loud, confident, and persistent, but they cannot define your essence unless you surrender that authority. Every human being carries a story that is deeper than appearance, stronger than prejudice, and more beautiful than expectation. The moment you begin listening to your own conscience instead of the endless noise surrounding you, a different life begins to reveal itself. You stop measuring your worth through comparison and start recognizing that your value existed long before anyone acknowledged it. The opinions of others become passing weather instead of permanent climate, and every step forward becomes an act of reclaiming the identity that had been waiting patiently beneath years of doubt, silence, expectation, and borrowed belief. There comes a point in every life when comfort begins to feel more like confinement than safety. It is the moment when you realize that many of the beliefs you carry were never chosen by you. They were inherited through generations, absorbed from the environment around you, or quietly accepted because questioning them seemed too difficult. Fear teaches people to remain where they are familiar, even when that familiarity slowly diminishes their spirit. It convinces them that silence is wiser than honesty, that fitting in is safer than standing apart, and that acceptance is worth more than authenticity. Yet the greatest transformations begin the moment a person finds the courage to challenge these invisible boundaries. Fear rarely announces itself with dramatic warnings. More often, it disguises itself as practicality, humility, or common sense. It whispers that your dreams are unrealistic, that your voice is too small to matter, or that your past has already determined your future. These thoughts become so familiar that they feel like personal convictions rather than borrowed limitations. Without noticing, you begin making decisions based on what frightens you instead of what inspires you. Every opportunity is measured against the possibility of failure rather than the possibility of growth. The labels placed upon us often become another form of fear. They suggest that people are fixed, incapable of change, and forever defined by a single characteristic, a single mistake, or a single circumstance. Some are told they are not intelligent enough to lead, not talented enough to create, not worthy enough to be loved, or not strong enough to overcome hardship. These labels settle into the heart like heavy stones, making every step toward a different future feel impossible. But a label has no power beyond the belief you give it. It is only a word until it becomes the foundation upon which you build your identity. Rejecting inherited limitations requires more than confidence. It requires honesty. You must be willing to examine every belief you hold and ask whether it truly belongs to you. Did you decide that you were incapable, or did someone else decide it long before you understood your own potential? Did you choose your fears, or were they passed down from people who had their own unfinished battles? These questions are uncomfortable because they force you to confront the possibility that much of your life has been shaped by voices that were never meant to guide your future. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that truth deserves a greater place in your life than comfort. It means speaking when silence would be easier, trying when failure seems possible, and continuing forward even when certainty is nowhere to be found. Courage asks you to trust that the person you are becoming is more powerful than the fears you are leaving behind. Every act of authenticity strengthens that trust until it becomes impossible to return to the smaller version of yourself. The world often rewards conformity because predictable people are easier to understand and easier to control. Someone who questions expectations, refuses limiting labels, and insists on living according to truth can make others uncomfortable. Not because they are wrong, but because they remind everyone else that freedom has always been available. Their example exposes the invisible chains that many have accepted without resistance. Choosing your own path may invite misunderstanding, criticism, or loneliness for a season, but those moments are temporary. The freedom gained by releasing inherited fear and rejecting false definitions creates a life rooted in purpose rather than approval. Allowing every decision to become an expression of who you truly are instead of an echo of who the world expected you to remain. Every human being enters the world carrying a voice unlike any other. It is not merely the sound that leaves the lips, but the quiet language of convictions, dreams, memories, and truths that shape a life. Yet for many people, that voice is buried beneath years of expectation. It becomes softer each time they choose acceptance over honesty, each time they suppress a thought to avoid rejection, and each time they trade authenticity for approval. Eventually, they become so accustomed to speaking the words others want to hear that they no longer recognize the sound of their own truth. The greatest transformation begins when that forgotten voice is finally allowed to speak without fear. Authenticity is often mistaken for confidence, but the two are not always the same. A person can appear confident while hiding behind a carefully constructed image designed to impress the world. Authenticity requires something deeper. It demands the courage to stand in your own reality, even when it does not fit neatly into the expectations of others. It asks you to embrace every part of your story, including the chapters marked by struggle, uncertainty, and loss. The person who accepts these experiences without shame no longer needs to pretend, because they understand that imperfections do not diminish their worth. They reveal the resilience that has carried them forward. Finding your authentic voice is rarely a single moment of discovery. It is a gradual process of removing everything that does not belong to you. It means questioning inherited beliefs, releasing unnecessary guilt, and refusing to let fear dictate your decisions. Every honest choice becomes another layer of disguise falling away. With each step, you become less concerned with being admired and more committed to being truthful. That shift changes the direction of an entire life because truth creates a foundation that no opinion can easily shake. There is extraordinary power in speaking from a place of genuine conviction. Words born from authenticity carry a weight that rehearsed performances never can. They reach beyond the surface because they come from lived experience rather than borrowed ideas. People may not always agree with them, but they recognize their sincerity. Authentic voices have the ability to awaken courage in others because they remind people that they, too, are capable of living without disguise. One honest voice can challenge generations of silence, proving that truth has a way of traveling farther than fear ever could. The world often encourages imitation. It celebrates trends, rewards conformity, and praises those who fit comfortably within familiar patterns. In such an environment, originality can feel risky. It may attract criticism from those who prefer certainty over change. Yet history has never been transformed by people who simply echoed the loudest voices around them. Every meaningful change began with someone willing to trust the quiet certainty within themselves instead of the approval of the crowd. Their strength did not come from having all the answers. It came from refusing to abandon their truth for the sake of acceptance. Embracing your authentic voice also transforms the way you see others. When you no longer hide behind masks, you become less interested in judging the masks worn by those around you. Compassion grows because you recognize that everyone is carrying invisible battles, searching for the courage to reveal who they truly are. Instead of competing for recognition, you begin encouraging authenticity wherever you find it. You understand that another person's light does not diminish your own. It simply adds to the brightness of the world. In that realization, your voice becomes more than a personal expression. It becomes an invitation for others to step into their own truth, to release the burden of pretending, and to discover the quiet freedom that has been waiting beneath every fear, every expectation, and every silence they have carried for far too long. There is a remarkable difference between being accepted by the world and accepting yourself. Many people spend years chasing approval, believing that happiness will finally arrive when they are admired, understood, or celebrated by others. They shape their personalities to match expectations, soften their opinions to avoid conflict, and silence parts of themselves that seem too different or too difficult to explain. On the surface, this pursuit may appear successful. It may earn praise, friendships, opportunities, and recognition. Yet beneath all of it remains a quiet emptiness, because no amount of external validation can replace the peace that comes from knowing and accepting who you truly are. Self-acceptance is not about believing you are flawless. It is about recognizing that your value has never depended on perfection. It means looking honestly at your strengths without arrogance and acknowledging your weaknesses without shame. It is the willingness to embrace every chapter of your story, including the painful ones, knowing that each experience has contributed to the person you are becoming. When you stop treating your mistakes as permanent definitions of your character, they become lessons instead of lifelong burdens. The past no longer exists to imprison you, but to prepare you for a wiser future. Freedom begins where comparison ends. As long as your worth is measured against someone else's achievements, appearance, or approval, you remain trapped inside a race that has no finish line. There will always be someone wealthier, more talented, more recognized, or more admired. Chasing those comparisons only deepens the belief that you are never enough. Self-acceptance breaks that cycle by reminding you that your purpose was never meant to be a copy of another person's journey. Every life carries its own rhythm, its own calling, and its own measure of success. The moment you embrace that truth, you stop competing with the world and begin growing into the person only you can become. There is quiet strength in refusing to apologize for your existence. Too often, people make themselves smaller to fit into spaces that cannot appreciate their fullness. They hide their intelligence to avoid intimidating others. They silence their compassion because kindness is mistaken for weakness. They suppress their dreams because ambition makes people uncomfortable. Self-acceptance challenges every one of these habits. It gives you permission to occupy your rightful place without guilt or fear. It reminds you that your gifts were not given to be hidden, but to be shared with confidence and humility. When you truly accept yourself, your relationships begin to change as well. You no longer seek people who merely validate your insecurities. Instead, you are drawn toward those who respect your honesty and encourage your growth. You stop clinging to connections built on performance because you understand that love rooted in pretense can never satisfy the heart. Authentic relationships flourish only when both people have the freedom to be seen as they truly are. Self-acceptance creates that freedom, allowing trust to replace fear and honesty to replace performance. This kind of freedom reaches beyond personal happiness. It changes the way you walk through the world. Your decisions become guided by conviction rather than approval. Your voice becomes steadier because it is no longer seeking permission. Challenges become opportunities for growth instead of proof of inadequacy. Even criticism loses much of its power because your identity is no longer built upon the fragile opinions of others. A person who has embraced themselves completely carries a quiet confidence that cannot be manufactured or borrowed. It shines through ordinary moments, steady choices, and unwavering integrity, inspiring others to believe that they too can release the weight of impossible expectations and discover the peace that has always been waiting within their own acceptance of who they have always been, without fear, without apology, and without surrendering the truth of their own spirit. A meaningful life is never measured by how perfectly you fulfilled someone else's expectations. It is measured by the courage you showed in becoming the person you were created to be. Too many people spend their years following paths they never chose, speaking words they never truly believed, and pursuing dreams that belonged to someone else. They mistake obedience for purpose and approval for fulfillment. Yet there comes a moment when the soul begins to ask deeper questions. It asks whether the life being lived reflects genuine conviction or merely the weight of inherited expectations. Those questions cannot be ignored forever, because purpose has a way of calling us back to ourselves, no matter how far we have wandered. Living with purpose begins by recognizing that your life carries a responsibility greater than personal success. Every action, every decision, and every act of courage leaves an impression on the people who come after you. Legacy is not reserved for famous names or extraordinary achievements. It is built quietly through ordinary choices made with honesty and compassion. It is found in the kindness that changes someone's day, the wisdom shared with a younger generation, the integrity shown when no one is watching, and the courage to stand for truth even when standing alone. These moments may never appear in history books, but they shape families, communities, and generations in ways that cannot be measured. Creating your own legacy requires releasing the desire to imitate the lives of others. The world often celebrates comparison, encouraging people to chase another person's definition of success. It suggests that fulfillment is found in matching someone else's accomplishments or collecting symbols of achievement that impress the crowd. But no two lives are meant to follow the same path. Your experiences, struggles, joys, and dreams have prepared you for a journey that belongs uniquely to you. Every attempt to live according to another person's blueprint pulls you farther away from the work only you can do. Purpose is revealed through faithful action rather than endless certainty. Many people wait until they feel completely prepared before pursuing what matters most. They believe confidence must come before commitment. In reality, confidence often grows only after the first courageous step has been taken. Purpose unfolds gradually, asking you to trust the next decision rather than demanding that you see the entire road ahead. Every honest effort teaches something new about your strengths, your character, and your ability to overcome obstacles that once seemed impossible. A lasting legacy is never built upon recognition alone. Applause fades, popularity changes, and achievements eventually become memories. Character, however, continues speaking long after words have been forgotten. People may not remember every success you earned, but they will remember how you treated them during difficult times. They will remember whether your presence brought hope or fear, encouragement or judgment, generosity or selfishness. The influence of a life rooted in purpose extends beyond accomplishments because it transforms the hearts of those who witness it. When you choose to live according to your deepest values, instead of the shifting expectations of the world, every ordinary day becomes an opportunity to build something that will outlive you. You stop asking whether your life looks impressive and begin asking whether it leaves people stronger, wiser, and more hopeful than before. You understand that your greatest contribution is not the image you project, but the truth you embody. In that understanding, every challenge becomes a chance to strengthen your character. Every setback becomes a lesson in perseverance. And every act of integrity becomes another stone laid in the foundation of a legacy that future generations will feel long after your footsteps have faded, because the life that remains faithful to its purpose continues speaking through every soul it has touched with courage, compassion, dignity, and unwavering truth.